Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Alvarado and I'm a graduate assistant at the Advancing Research and Curriculum. Today we will be discussing Chicago Style 17th edition and Turabian Style 9th edition. This presentation was developed by the TAMIU writing consultant and the Advancing Research and Curriculum. The information that we will be presenting today will cover the latest guidelines on Chicago 17th edition and Turabian 9th edition formatting styles. However, keep in mind that it's important to consult your professor's instructions and syllabi. With that being said, while the information we will be presenting to you today is standardized, it's important to follow the directions and guidelines given by your professor first and foremost. So what is Chicago 17th edition and why do we use it? The Chicago Manual of Style, or CMOS 17th edition, is the latest version developed by the University of Chicago Press. This new version was released in fall 2017. This updated version emphasizes changes that are reflected in our digital world. With information and sources being found increasingly online, many of Chicago's 17th edition's changes reflect these changes with specific rules, which are being implemented for the first time. Chicago style is being used by academic fields in higher education for citing sources that emphasizes the needs of the author. Chicago style is also unique in that it provides two distinct styles, author date style and note and bibliography style. It is heavily used by historian-related fields such as history, anthropology, and some social sciences among business and professional publications and academics. Chicago style is also one of the most frequently used citation styles in American higher education institutions. However, how it's used depends on the instructor or the instruction at hand. Note that even though it is less commonly used as compared to MLA and APA, it's still one of the major formatting styles. Now let's talk a little bit about why Chicago and Turabian styles are tied together. As the cover of a manual of writers suggests, what we think of as Turabian style is really a modification of Chicago style. Kate L. Turabian was the dissertation secretary at the University of Chicago in 1937. She developed the Chicago style so that it corresponded with the Chicago 10th edition to give the university's dissertation publications a consistent style. In later publications of the Chicago style, this extended to other student writing as well. Turabian style is used primarily by students and researchers, and Chicago is used by people who are publishing professionally, but also students and researchers often. So one commonly asked question is, are Turabian and Chicago style the same thing? Basically, yes they are. Interestingly, this was not always the case. Turabian used to be a modified version of Chicago style, but they've eventually converged with each new edition. The biggest difference between Chicago and Turabian is that Turabian is a much more condensed version of the very lengthy Chicago manual. Turabian also offers some guidelines for student papers that you won't see as much in Chicago, which deals primarily with professional publications. Still, the guidelines for both manuals are pretty much referring to the same thing. So now that we have a little overview of what Chicago and Turabian are, what's new in the Chicago 17th edition? In fall 2017, Chicago Style's 17th edition replaced the 16th edition. This was Chicago's first update in 7 years. In this newest edition, we see a few changes and revamping throughout the manual. For instance, in Chicago's newest edition, you'll see several small changes surrounding comma placement, hyphen use, and capitalizations. One important change is that IBID will no longer be used to shorten citations. Instead of using IBID, you would simply cite using the shortened citation. In its update, Chicago also accounted for the growing presence of technology in academia. Many internet terms and web-based sources are now given specific rules. You'll see this for web media, online text sources, apps, etc. DOI is now used for books, format, and placement. You'll also see the rules for grammar and punctuation have been slightly expanded and clarified significantly. You'll also see the rules for grammar and punctuation have been expanded and clarified significantly. All in all, the Chicago Manual continues to grow with every update. To think of this in context, the 17th edition manual was 1,146 pages, and the 16th edition manual was 1,026 pages. The growth of the Chicago Manual is intended to clarify, add on to, or modify any existing rules in place. Chicago may also make new rules to accommodate for new technology. So now we know what's new in the Chicago 17th edition. So what's new in the Turabian 9th edition? According to the University of Chicago Press, Turabian 9th edition includes the following new updates. Turabian offers an enhanced guidance on using digital materials and citing online sources. Turabian also offers practical advice for cultivating information literacy. Turabian has also been expanding their instructions for formatting papers and submitting them electronically. Turabian has become increasingly aligned with the 17th edition of the Chicago Manual of Style. This is a big one to note because Turabian and Chicago have become so intertwined that people often think of them as the same style. The new edition of Turabian also offers supplementary resources for students and teachers. These can be found at www.turabian.org. So now we'll discuss some general student paper formatting. These are just some general guidelines that professors typically but don't always ask students to follow when it comes to writing papers. So you'll want to use a standard font like 12 point Times New Roman. Double space your text, use 1-inch margins or larger. This is the default setting in Microsoft Word. You'll want to indent new paragraphs by about 1/2 inch. This is also a default setting in Microsoft Word. And finally, you may be asked to place page numbers in the top right or bottom center of the page. Note that these are simply general guidelines, so if your professor asks for something different, follow your instructor's requirements. The requirements set by your professor overrule these guidelines. So now let's talk a little bit about title pages. Chicago does not require a title page. Usually they advise for your title to be at the top of the page. In the case that students need a title page, Turabian offers guidelines for creating a student title page. For an example of a Turabian style title page, look at the depiction to the right. Center align your text, double space everything, and use the same font that you will use throughout the rest of your paper. Your title should be placed about 1/3 of the way down the page, as depicted on the right. Your title should also be in title case and in bold. If you have a subtitle, this will go after the title page. Just end your title with a colon, then place the subtitle on the next line, and use the same formatting as the title. Bold, title case, and consistent font with the rest of the paper. About 2/3 of the way down of the page, you can add any additional information that your instructor requests. Generally, the following information is acceptable: your name, your course number, professor's name, and the due date. Each new piece of information gets its own line. Note that your title page will not need a page number. Start the page numbering at 2 and begin on the second page. An easy way to do this is to use the different first page option in Microsoft Word. You can find this in the heading footer page numbering settings. This will allow you to remove the page number from the first page and start numbering on the second page. So now that we've discussed the title page, let's jump into a little bit of formatting. Titles in Chicago style almost exclusively use title case for titles. That is, most words are capitalized except for prepositions, articles, and conjunctions that are not the first word. So when should italics be used? Titles that are long and that stand alone should be italicized. And these include novels, books, anthologies, and collection titles, albums, films, movies, TV series, periodicals, databases, and plays. So when should italics not be used? Titles of short works or works contained in other works should not be italicized. Instead, use quotation marks around them. Works that use quotation marks include articles, essays, chapters, poems, single TV episodes, songs, speeches, tweets, single videos, or single images. Keep this formatting in mind as it applies to the body of the document, the notes, and the bibliography. Now let's take a look at some in-text citation guidelines for Chicago and Turabian style. Mind you that the information discussed in the following slides are a lot to take in, so we will be refreshing on these in our part 2 of this video, so stick around for that. So without further ado, the general format for in-text citations are as follows. Open parentheses, author last name, year of publication, comma, page number, close parentheses. An example of this is Stacy 2013 192. Notice how the year that the work was published and the page number are separated by a comma, and how there is no comma between the author's last name and the year. When a source has multiple authors, you would cite as follows. For two authors, use the same format as the general format for one author, then separate the author's last name from the first with and. For three authors, list the author's last name separated by a comma and then and before the last author. For four or more authors, use the last name of the author listed first, et al., the year, then the page number separated by a comma. Use et al. After the first author's name if a particular reference contains more than three authors. You might find yourself on an official government or nonprofit website and needing to cite an organization. When organizations are authors of a source, the name may be shortened, but abbreviations are discouraged. So your best bet is to write out the full name of the organization. An example is National Alliance on Mental Illness. Sometimes there will be no author altogether. If no personal author is listed, determine whether an organization is responsible for the content. If so, use that organization's name as the author in the in-text citation. In the case that the author is unknown, for the in-text citation, use the title, which can be shortened as long as the first word matches the title listed for that entry in the reference list. Now let's look at some examples of in-text citations. In-text citations always attempt to use a name, a year, and a page location of the source if it is used. However, sometimes information is missing and we have to modify our citation accordingly. Pages are only used if the work has pages. There are a few ways you can format an in-text citation within your sentence. When you have an author and a page number, the full in-text citation could go at the end of the sentence in parentheses. This would just include the generic author, year, and page number in parentheses. Another way to cite in text is to attribute the author within the sentence. An example of this could be Villarreal 2020 says yada 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 18. Careful when you cite this way. Just make sure that the year of the publication is listed after the author's last name and that the page number is listed at the end of the sentence. You can also cite multiple citations together. It would make sense to do this if your sentence or if your ideas come from multiple sources. One way to cite multiple sources together is to write the two citations out separately, then simply separate them with a semicolon. Note that if the different works are by the same author, you may separate them with a comma. When you have a source without a known author, you can either use the name of the organization that published a work or a shortened title of the work instead. If you're using the title of the work in the place of the author, the title should be listed in quotation marks. If you're citing a source from a work using multiple specific pages, use an end dash between the range of pages. If you are citing multiple works and the authors have the same last name, use their first name initials to distinguish between them. Like mentioned previously, when citing a work with two authors, separate the last names of the two authors by and. When citing a work with three authors, separate the last names of the three authors with commas and use an and before the last author. If a work has four or more authors, use et al. After listing one of the author's last names. If you're citing multiple works from the same author in the same year, add a single letter after the year starting with A and order these alphabetically. Another thing to note is that Chicago style discourages the use of indirect citations, that is, where your source references another source. However, if this must be done, include both the citation you are reading as well as the citation for the source you did not read. Use the text quoted in to create the parenthetical citation. When citing works with an organization as the author, use the entire name of the organization in your in-text citation and avoid abbreviations. When citing works with no author and no publishing organization, make sure that the title of the work that you're citing in text matches the title used in the bibliography. So are bibliographies required or not? Both the author date style and the notes bibliography style may include a bibliography. The bibliography is required in the author date style, but for the notes bibliography style, it's merely recommended. For the author date style, note that the bibliographies use the title references. On the other hand, the notes bibliography style uses the title bibliography instead. There are some guidelines in common between references and bibliographies. Both references and bibliographies start their list on a new page. The title should be typed at the top of the page and centered on the first line. The first line of the references should be set at the left margin, and all lines underneath should be indented in hanging indentation format. The works listed should be alphabetized by the author's last name or their surname. For authors from Eastern countries, use the format the author uses in their work. Careful to alphabetize each reference letter by letter. You can remember this by thinking, nothing precedes something. For example, Brown J goes before Browning A. Names beginning with Mac or Mac should be capitalized as they are spelled. References by the same author should be arranged chronologically with the earliest work first. A single authored work should be placed before a multi-authored work that begins with the same author. In the case that you have references by the same author or multiple authors in the same order, alphabetize by title. Use a 3M dash in place of a repeated author's name. Works with no authors should be alphabetized by title, with the title in the author position. Only use anonymous as an author if the work is signed anonymously. As described previously, if no author is present, use the name of the organization or the title of the work instead. Alphabetize a group or organization name as author by the first significant word. Now let's look at a general sample of what kinds of sources you might cite in a bibliography or references. Note that this is a sampling of possible kinds of sources one might encounter and want to cite in their bibliography. For full examples and notations, check out this Chicago Style Manual. You can use this slide as a reference. If you're ever looking to cite any of the following, feel free to refer back to this PowerPoint or this slide. We have citations for a book with an editor, a chapter in a book, an article, a magazine article, a newspaper article, web page, social media, music, film, online video, television, images. So if you ever need to cite any of these references, refer back here to remember how to do that. Now it's your turn to try it. Look for some specific examples of the following types of sources and try citing them yourself. I highly recommend you try this exercise out. It should help you feel a lot more confident when citing common sources in Chicago style. And if you ever feel stuck, just email our office at writingconsultant@tamiu.edu. You can also come visit us in Pellegrino 203. We're happy to help. For complete guidelines and examples, you may check out our other guides. Check out our APA 7th edition and MLA 8th edition guides. Links will be down below. Thank you and stay tuned for more.